Hi there, and welcome to the Above and Back podcast with me, Valeriia. Today's guest is nothing short of extraordinary, a powerhouse of a woman whose work spans more fields than you'd think possible. Valeriia, I'm thrilled to have you here.
Hi.
You're a city council deputy in Cherkasy, a businesswoman, a volunteer, a public figure, and winner of the Mrs. Ukraine International pageant. How do you manage to juggle all these roles, especially as someone who seems so delicate and graceful?
Margarita, thank you for such a kind compliment. Yes, I do wear many hats, but it didn't happen overnight. It's taken years of experience and a lot of hard work.
Normally, I invite experts to talk about specific topics, but you're actually the first person and the first woman who's here simply because of your personality. I find it truly inspiring. I follow you on social media. You're active every single day, and I almost forgot, you're a mother of 5 children. That's no small thing. So my first question is, what pushed you to change directions in your career? You've worked in law enforcement, education, public service. What caused that evolution? How did you become the woman you are today?
That's a great question. And honestly, it touches on half of my life. My family and I often talk about this with our children. Based on my own journey, I encourage them to pursue what they truly love, even if it's not what I imagined for them. When I was a child, I dreamed of being a police officer. Justice, integrity, dignity, those were my guiding values. I was determined to study law. I got into Kyiv Mahila Academy. But due to a scholarship rule at our college, only one of 2 top students could choose a specific major. And the girl ahead of me picked law. I wasn't allowed to choose the same. I had to pivot. The rector kindly gave me time to choose another program, and I picked social sciences, which still included law, social psychology, child development, and family studies. I got my bachelor's degree there. Then, without telling my parents, I applied to the National Academy of Internal Affairs, passed the exams, and enrolled. That's when I finally started working at the Cherkasy Regional Police Department. I loved it, but I didn't stay long. I got pregnant, went on maternity leave a week before my daughter was born, and eventually realized that I couldn't balance that demanding career with raising children. I'm the kind of person who either does things properly or not at all. So after 6 years, I made the hard decision to leave. They asked me to stay. I had access to classified documents, worked with immigration cases, and had responsibilities involving both Ukrainian citizens moving abroad and foreigners coming to live in Ukraine. But I stepped away to focus on my family.
Then something unexpected happened. I was always surrounded by children, though, oddly enough, I'd been afraid of kids since childhood. I don't know why, but wherever I went, they gravitated to me. One day, a friend's little girl was just standing outside my window. I came out and asked, "What's going on?" she said. "Aunt Lara, I want to come play and stay with you." So I let her in and called her parents. And then it hit me. This wasn't random. It was a sign. I needed to do something with this energy.
I started looking for space, began learning about early childhood education, and people advised me to get a formal degree. I enrolled in a master's program at Cherkasy National University, graduated with honors, continued into postgraduate studies, and eventually defended my dissertation. Today, I have a doctorate in education and pedagogy. That's how I transitioned from law enforcement into education, and launched 2 businesses along the way.
And you're also a deputy.
Yes, that came later. First, I opened the kindergarten, then I got involved in politics. I didn't become a deputy right away. It took time. All of my work is publicly available on the City Council website. But if I were to tell the full story, we'd be here for hours.
I'm always fascinated by the people who shape someone's personality from an early age. In one of your interviews, I read that your grandfather had a big influence on you. Could you tell us a bit more about how he helped form the person you are today?
Thank you, Margarita. This question always brings tears to my eyes, and I'm trying to hold them back. But yes, it's true. My grandfather was and still is my hero. He showed me that you have to move, take action, build teams, and you have to do it with heart and soul. He had a powerful personality. He led the construction of social and critical infrastructure across our city and the Cherkasy region. After the earthquake in Armenia, he was sent to the city of Kirovakan, now Vanadzor, to help rebuild it. His task was to form a construction brigade from 3 Ukrainian regions, Cherkasy, Kirovohrad, and Khmelnytsky, and essentially build a small town from scratch for Ukrainian workers and their families. They created a living infrastructure and then expanded it so local residents could move in too. Every Friday, I called my grandfather. I loved spending weekends with my grandparents in the village. At first, they lived in the city, but then they moved. Originally, they were from Kryvyi Rih. My grandfather was transferred to Cherkasy to help build the famous Azot chemical plant. And so, even when he was in staff meetings on Fridays, if he didn't pick up, I'd call again and again, once, twice, 5 times, until he finally answered, even during a meeting. Then he'd pick me up, and we'd head to the village. They had a big farm, and from a young age, we all worked, regardless of whether you were a girl or a boy. My brother is 2 years younger than me, and we both had chores. There was a task list on the fridge every morning. We helped around the household in the greenhouses. We grew tomatoes, cucumbers, and sold them too. Rabbits, nutria, mink, ferrets, cows, goats. We had everything. So for me, work was always a core value. Education is important, sure, but work, hands-on, daily effort, that's what truly shapes a person.
One of the questions our female audience always asks, especially moms, is, how do you manage it all? You're a mother of 5, a businesswoman, a public servant. How do you balance everything? Do you have any strategies or life hacks?
Honestly, at first, I didn't think too much about it. One child came, then another, then a third. Each one marked a new stage, a new layer of growth. You just adapt and learn along the way. With 3 kids, and while building a house, I realized I had no choice but to master time management. I was in charge of the construction, working directly with the builders while my husband worked elsewhere. Sometimes the girls had lunch in the car. With borscht, I had cooked earlier in the morning. It was totally normal, because life didn't stop. We had to keep the whole system running. Eventually I realized, I need structure, or I'll lose myself. As a person, as a woman, as a human being. So I started writing long to-do lists, planning schedules. I even drew up a flip chart to coordinate my kids' routines with mine. School drop-offs, classes, grocery runs, everything. Because work didn't stop either. Business still had to be managed. I had no nannies, no housekeepers. Maybe that was my mistake, but time teaches you everything. By the time my kids were in school, I had already left law enforcement to focus on motherhood. But as they grew older, I knew I had to re-enter the world, develop myself, not just keep running in circles. I've never liked the hamster wheel lifestyle. And in my family, everyone led by example. You don't stand still. You grow. My office was right across from the nursery room. We took kids as young as 1.5 into our kindergarten. My youngest, Zakhar, was even younger, so I kept him nearby. He napped right across from my desk while I worked. Built a team, managed paperwork, forged partnerships in early education.
I have a question for you here. How do you see the role of private educational institutions like your Sova Kids space within Ukraine's broader education system?
You know, Margarita, if you'd asked me this question before the war, my answer would have been completely different. But the reality is, we're living under martial law, and the education system is changing rapidly. I'm honestly glad that a new law on preschool education was passed in Ukraine. I'm deeply grateful to MP Volodymyr Voronov, who chairs the subcommittee on preschool education in the Verkhovna Rada. He invited me to join the working group to help develop the bill. And thanks to that experience, we worked productively. The president signed the law, and now it's in effect. But we still face enormous challenges. Many schools, both general and secondary, have been destroyed. Kids are studying remotely, and in frontline regions, many are learning underground. That includes preschoolers, elementary, and high school students. The entire system is being reformed. At the same time, we need to rethink our approach to professions. Some fields that were traditionally considered male need to open up to others. So many men are at the front lines or have been lost, and many women have left the country. That's a loss of human capital. Career guidance is more important than ever.
as is expanding lyceums and vocational colleges. So yes, reform is absolutely necessary. And when it comes to the private sector, I believe we'll see a significant increase in private institutions within the next 3 to 4 years.
I agree, and they're truly needed. Now, when we talk about higher education, there's this growing idea, especially among young people, that university isn't necessary anymore. That it's easier to take a few online courses, start making money quickly, and skip the formal education. What's your take on that, and how has higher education shaped your own journey?
That's a great point. I think the key word here is independence. Education gives you the ability to make informed decisions because you're relying on your mind, your skills, your knowledge. Nowadays, there are a lot of short-term courses, trainings, and online learning options, which is totally fine, and I support that too. But I still believe classical higher education is essential for everyone, girls and boys alike. In fact, especially for girls. We're seeing a global shift where women are stepping into leadership roles. And I believe that same shift is coming to Ukraine, accelerated by the war. We'll see more women in government, local councils, and in leadership roles across business and public life. Positions traditionally held by men. I have 4 daughters. For them, education is always a top priority, and that includes foreign languages. I believe each child should learn at least one other language. One of my eldest daughters speaks 6. She's absolutely unique, strong-willed, and her career choice isn't one typically associated with girls.
That's amazing, truly inspiring. And she sounds like a real hope for Ukraine's future. By the way, there are still very few girls in STEM fields. I hope that changes and that it starts at home, with the family, with the message that education matters, that it's worth getting a real profession and using it to serve the country.
Yes, exactly. I'm so glad you brought up STEM. One of my friends is actively promoting this direction in Ukraine, not just professionally, but through practical steps. His team studies the best global practices, sources modern equipment, and brings it to Ukraine. They've even visited the United States, signed memorandums of cooperation with top universities. Now they're focused on physics and chemistry education, specifically equipping classrooms to support these fields.
That's fantastic. Valeriia, among many things, you're also the founder of the Wings NGO, which supports large families. You're a mother of many kids yourself, and you help others too. What challenges do such families face today in Ukraine, and how does your foundation support them?
I founded the NGO during COVID. I found myself isolated with a house full of children, and I thought, if I have this much going on, what about low-income families who don't have the resources or space? I couldn't ignore it. It's just who I am. I have to be useful to others. So I requested data from the Department of Social Policy and the Cherkasy City Council. It turned out there were 50 families in need. We started providing them with food. At first, I funded it through my own business. Then, friends and acquaintances joined in to help. Eventually, we began applying for grants. Actually, my very first degree at Kyiv Mahila Academy me was in social sciences and technologies, specifically in social work. We worked with a Renaissance Foundation back then, and I learned how to write proper grant applications, how to submit proposals, where to send them. I just had to dust off those skills and apply them again. We won several grants. The biggest one was for 1 million hryvnias. Recently, we opened a public hub in Cherkasy called Spillodia, which now provides free services not only to large families, but also to military families and internally displaced people, IDPs. It all happened step by step. First, we focused on big families. Then, when the war broke out, we started helping displaced people. Then, we focused on children, and now also support military families.
Valeriia, during the war, you've also been helping children, offering both humanitarian aid and psychological support. Tell us about the Hibuki Therapy Project. What is it, and what are the results so far?
That's a big one. Before the war, I ran the largest private preschool in Cherkasy. We had 100% enrollment. And then the full-scale invasion began. I know others lost much more, but for me, it was still a serious blow. I had to stop everything. 2 teams of staff relied on me, and of course, each of them had families. The NGO team had families too, and no one had support or stable work anymore. About a month later, I decided to take responsibility and try to restart, basically from scratch. We started with just 10 children. We managed to set up a shelter in the basement, and we were the first in the city to resume early childhood education under these conditions. Later, I was invited to speak to other kindergarten and child development center owners. Many of them were women who had gone abroad. It was for the All-Ukrainian Association of Children's Centers. They asked me how I managed it, what gave me the courage, what tools I used. It was during one of those meetings that a psychologist mentioned different methods of supporting children, and among them, Hibuki therapy. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But a month later, we started noticing changes in our kids. Our psychologist, who works with us full-time, began to observe an increase in tears, tantrums, even bedwetting during naps. It was clear something wasn't right, and the classical tools of child psychology didn't quite work in wartime. I remembered Hibuki and started researching it. I found a single video on a website in Dnipro. I tried to find out who was behind the project. I reached out to people in Dnipro who might know, but they told me the lead had moved to Poland. I eventually found her on social media. I wrote to her for weeks. She wasn't replying because she didn't have stable internet access. This went on for a month. It was already June by then. Finally, I got a response. They gave me a phone number and said, "This is the project manager. She's in Israel. You can try contacting her directly." So I did. For 1 week, then 2, then 3. I wrote to every messenger app I could find. Eventually, we connected. I said, "I want to bring this project to Ukraine. I don't know if it's already running here, but I know I want to do it." She explained that they weren't allowed to come to Ukraine in person. The Israeli embassy had restricted travel, but we could meet in Poland. I agreed. I had just 2 days to form a team and go to Warsaw. I brought along a neuropsychologist and another psychologist from my kindergarten. During our meeting, I learned that Hibuki therapy was already being used in some Ukrainian regions. There were even manufacturers in Ukraine ready to produce Hibuki toys in cooperation with the Israeli team. We went through several rounds of talks, submitted motivation letters, and finally, they agreed to work with us, but only after we completed formal training. So in August, we trained with the Israeli coalition, and in September, we received 500 Hibuki dogs for our Cherkasy region. At the time, a total of 5,000 toys were provided by American donors for use in Ukraine. After that, the project really took off. We formed a nationwide network, Israelis, Ukrainians, and Americans working together to reach almost every region. Of course, since it's a charity project, burnout became a real risk. Some regions slowed down, others stayed active. Eventually, we entered the educational system. Hibuki for education, Hibuki in preschool shelters, especially in Lviv. People say you shouldn't brag, but honestly, I think you should. Because this was built with my brain and my strategy, and I'm proud of it. Cherkasy was the first region to implement Hibuki in education. It started with a school in Zolotonosha. Then I helped set up another team in the Zaporizhzhia region. They're doing amazing work now. And I think that drive to create something and then step back, that's from my grandfather. Of course, he was building in another country at a larger scale, but the spirit is the same. Today, thanks to sponsorship from Metinvest, Zaporizhzhia is the most active region. First, it was just 10 people. Then, it was 35 institutions. Now, after the second wave of training, we're at 75 institutions, schools, preschools, NGOs, all using Hibuki. Some of them have even started applying for grants and involving local communities. They work with children, teachers, and especially kids from military families. And now, we've also launched a version of Hibuki therapy specifically for children of Ukrainian soldiers. This is the most emotional part for me. One of the projects was called My Dad is an Angel. The children of fallen heroes received Hibuki dogs, and also Easter and St. Nicholas gifts sent by foreign NGOs. Packages were delivered to mothers through Nova Pochta, and I want to thank them for helping us. That was the hardest part. Later, we began working with the Presidential Brigade, named after Bohdan Khmelnytsky, supporting the children of both fallen and active duty soldiers. This area now needs the most funding, honestly. That's why we keep going, as a team. It's not just me. There's a coordinator in Israel, and we serve as his team here on the ground.
Valeriia, you have so much to be proud of, and rightfully so. Your work is meaningful, timely, and deeply human. I'd also like to ask about your role as a deputy. As a woman in this position, especially during full-scale war, what challenges do you face and what projects have you been able to implement?
As deputies, whether at the city or regional level, we carry serious responsibility, especially during wartime. We're not just responsible for ourselves, but for our work in local governance, proposing budgets, managing public funds, and implementing community projects. When I ran for office, we had both a team-wide platform and individual programs for each candidate.
I've stayed committed to mine, despite the war. I promised my voters certain things, and I intend to deliver. My focus is on educational and social initiatives. Things like inclusive infrastructure, in my district, the 3rd electoral district of Cherkasy, we've created several barrier-free spaces, rebuilt sidewalks, and improved accessibility. But none of this happens alone. People come to you with problems, with questions, and you have to respond. This job requires collaboration with every other council member, with departments, with the mayor, with faction leaders. It requires constant communication, trust, and reputation.
You know, people often assume women in leadership, but especially politics, face a lot of negativity.
Якісь важливі ролі, в ролі депутата, взагалі там імідж депутата, зазвичай негативно.
But watching you, especially on social media, I never get that impression. Quite the opposite, I admire you deeply. And yes, someone might say this interview is too flattering, but you deserve it. By the way, remind me, you were awarded an order, right? What was it for?
Yes, Margarita. I've received several awards, although many of them haven't been widely publicized.
Let's fix that if we can.
Gladly. I've received church honors, state awards, public service medals. Some were from local authorities, some from military units for helping the army. And not just children of military families, but for organizing fundraising auctions for drones for our armed forces. For example, I was awarded the Ukrainian French Order of Queen Anne, Honor of the Fatherland, with a silver star. Also, the Order of Saint Sophia for a significant contribution to society, strong civic leadership, and charitable work. Just recently, I received a church award from Metropolitan Epiphanius. We created 2 educational centers at the Sunday School of St. Michael's Garrison Cathedral in Cherkasy, spaces for the children of military families and for Sunday school students in general. Education there is free. Classes are taught by Red Cross staff, cathedral workers, and Sunday school teachers. We renovated one of the spaces, furnished it, bought learning materials and equipment, so children could recover educational losses caused by war, while also having a place to hear the Word of God in a modern and welcoming setting.
Your accomplishments are truly inspiring, and now you're heading to the United States to represent Ukraine at the prestigious Mrs. International pageant.
Yes, I am.
What impact has this pageant had on your life and your work, and why did you decide to take part in it in the first place?
I was invited to participate. At first, I said no. To me, it felt like something from the modeling world. And while I believe every woman should have her own space for beauty in daily life, this was something else entirely. Honestly, it came as a surprise. And it felt like a big responsibility. You don't just represent yourself. You're representing your city, your region, your country. I was nervous, not because I lacked confidence, but because it was so new. It felt like starting another big project from scratch, and I knew I'd have to do it well. I hesitated. I spoke to my colleagues in the council about whether it might affect my work, whether it would be misunderstood. You know how people talk about beauty pageants.
говорять різне про конкурси краси жіночі. Для мене
But what convinced me was the mission behind the contest. It's not just about looks. It's about celebrating women who are mothers, entrepreneurs, community leaders. Women with education, vision, and impact. That's why I agreed.
І в такому я погодилася брати участь.
And yes, it's been a wild ride. Photo shoots, media interviews, magazine covers.
Зйомки, журнали, воно понеслося.
Things I never imagined. But I had something to share.
Тому що, власне, було чим поділитися, але
And it became a beautiful platform for self-expression, personal growth, and transformation. To show that yes, you're a businesswoman, but you also embody beauty. And that's powerful. We're not professional models. We learned everything from scratch. There were hard days, emotional moments. Some contestants wanted to quit, but we always supported each other. And I'm incredibly grateful I was part of it.
Valeriia, tell us honestly, what's the secret to your beauty after 5 kids?
Honestly, genetics. I'm lucky to have inherited my looks and figure from my parents. But staying in shape, that takes effort. I don't love intense workouts, but I adore swimming. The pool is my therapy, my joy.
So the pool is your secret weapon?
That and skincare. Yes, I use cosmetic treatments. Let's be honest. Time catches up with everyone.
And finally, I'd love for you to share a message for our listeners. The modern Ukrainian woman plays 100 roles. What's your advice for staying true to yourself and still achieving everything you want? What's the key to Valeriia Shynkariovan's success?
First and foremost, stop chasing perfection. Be real. If you're a mom right now, be with your kids. If you want to start a business, pour your energy into that. But do it step by step. You can try doing everything at once, sure. But in my experience, real growth comes gradually. Believe in yourself. That belief helps you do more. Not just for your family, but for society. And don't forget about yourself. Find time for rest, for joy, for you. Because if you lose yourself, everything else will fall apart too. Stay inspired. Do good. Stay bright. Even when the world throws shadows, goodness usually wins.
And it does. I wish you success at the pageant. But even more than that, I wish you joy in the experience. Whatever happens, I know you'll represent Ukraine with strength, dignity, and beauty. Thank you for this conversation, Valeriia, and thank you for all that you do. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, send your support to Valeriia, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.
І підписатися на мій канал. До нових зустрічей!